We're gonna call the meeting to order at 6:02. Sorry for the delay, just getting the owl going. Got our minute taker here, got our timekeeper. And so we'll open the floor for public comment. Just a reminder, it's 3 minutes per person. Anyone would like to make a comment? Please.
Okay, cool. Wasn't sure if I should wait.
You know the drill.
Hi, I'm Shauna. Thank you all for being here on this very, very hot day. There was some questions that I had about the agenda, and I know obviously it's not question and answer, but I wanted to compel you to provide more information as far as the executive sessions go, because according to what's listed, it states the evaluation of an employee or appointment or evaluation. And I wanted to confirm that the results of either the monitoring report or the union listening tour is not an evaluation of the people that is the subject of. The listening tour is, my understanding, a survey regarding the conditions of the buildings, which includes surveying the climate, which is under the building administrators and the admin and central office. And the only employee that the board can evaluate is the superintendent. So how we're going to be doing an executive session to evaluate people other than the superintendent is a little confusing to me. And also, the results of the listening tour is not an evaluation. This is to provide feedback, but the union is not an employer, so they are not providing an evaluation. Additionally, the monitoring report that is being for the superintendent performance, for the staff monitoring report, it's just unclear because if there's new information, why that information shouldn't be shared to the public, because the same reason about employees that are not the superintendent. Additionally, these types of surveys are performed in public across the nation and in the state. Other schools have the climate surveys and listening tours done in public. The Vermont NEA recommends that they be done in public and say that it's often challenged if they are going to be done in executive session, because it is the public's best interest to know the conditions that our staff are working under. And it's how we make positive changes going forward. The last thing is just the monitoring report 2.3 that is going to be done today. I'd like to go on the record to state I dispute that there is sufficient evidence under the report. I've already been very clear about all of my beliefs about the financial conditions, so I won't repeat myself, but I just believe that there is not sufficient evidence to accept it. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Kelly. I'm from Bristol. And I emailed all board members earlier or later last week about the monitoring report 2.3 on financial conditions and activities. I hope that you guys were able to look that over and see that in fact, we as a district were months behind delinquent on paying a bill, and that there was a report. So I too am asking that that is taken into effect when we look at compliance versus non-compliance for superintendent. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay. So we'll move on to our first action item, which is to approve the agenda. Can I please get a motion to approve the agenda? So moved. Kathy first. Second. Melissa second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Next is our consent agenda, which includes 2 sets of meeting minutes and our pay orders. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Daniela first. Second. Kathy second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Next is our executive limitations and monitoring. So the first is a motion to accept the monitoring report 2.3 financial conditions and activities. So remember that a motion to accept just opens the floor for us to discuss it, and then we can make a decision afterwards if we don't. So can I get a motion to approve? Gentlemen,
Second.
Steve, second. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any discussion?
I think we wanted the discussion before.
Sorry, yes, retract the motion. Thank you very much. Retract the first and seconds. Go to discussion first. Yeah, okay,
First and seconds are fine.
sorry, you know what I mean here. Discussion. Any notes? So we had heard some public comment just now about one of the reports. We got an update on one of those things in our inboxes. To give some context to one of the public comments, so, for the Surfway, for example. So that was during the lobby and restroom project, and one of the subcontractors was scoping a rainwater pipe, and that pipe burst, and it started to ruin sorry. Scoping the rainwater pipe, when closing it, it was done incorrectly. A thunderstorm hit, the valve popped open again, and the roof runoff went into near the pool hallway. And then the water went through the lobby and the gym. So even though the valve got closed, there was damage. So it wasn't a MAUSD bill after the subcontractor took responsibility for it. And then there was some resolution between different insurance agencies. We did pay the bill to save a relationship, but it was a insurance claim at the end of it. Any questions about that? It's a very boiled down version.
I guess my question or statement would be, and maybe this is kind of void for you, because I don't know if this has ever happened in the past, but I guess from my finance background, should we not pay the bill and recognize their subsequent receivable from an insurance claim, or was the insurance company saying they had to pay Servco or the other contractor, who I can't recall the second, back directly?
So the process ended up working this way. We paid the bill, we were reimbursed from our insurance company negotiated with their insurance company, and they were reimbursed. We probably should never have paid the bill. And our desire, and upon advice from our insurance company, was that would work, and we wanted that relationship with the vendor to be in place for the next water damage we have. Understanding that we did call to have mitigation of that rainwater, knowing that what had happened was that valve had popped. We could see it when we closed it. Probably the proper thing to do would have been to reach out to Wright and Morrissey and have them mitigate this. There's water flowing into our gym. For those of you who were here before, that was a unbelievably expensive replacement of the gym floor just a few years ago. So our goal, our principal's goal at the moment, was to get someone in immediately. I think we managed the cost by bringing someone in. All that to say, our partner, Servpro in this instance, was kept whole, slow, but not due to our lack of payment of an invoice that was due from us. And then at the end of it, we did go in, pay it, booked it as a receivable from our insurance reimbursed us, and then the insurance companies covered it out. Does that get us to it, Melissa?
Yes, thank you.
Any other thoughts about 2.3?
There was a question about a payment to an out-of-district school that arose. I don't know, Boyd, can you give us some more background?
I'm not sure. And out of, I'm not even I'm not sure what that is coming from. Where are you seeing that? I may have missed it completely.
So we had an email, and the public comment too, about some delinquent payments that were paid to an out-of-district placement school. So I can. If we don't have that information now, we can certainly get it.
We'll certainly look for it.
Okay.
I have it. Do you want me to
Sure.
read it?
Sure. Or just the parts that are pertinent, the question or the whole
Right.
thing, yeah.
We have a student, an MAUHS, I'm sorry, not a school district student that attends Rock Point School. Per the contract between MAUSD and Rock Point, the district was to make monthly payments of $3,009.44, totaling a yearly tuition of $35,185. The full tuition of $35,185 was paid on February 23rd of 2024. And then there was a subsequent payment in April, on April 26th of 24, was made to Rock Point School for $19,540. So if the tuition was already paid at mid-year, the question is, what was that $19,540 payment?
Perhaps the 35, and I'm just going from what little I might know. That sounds, I believe that was initially a school year payment for 35 and the 19 is for a year-round portion. And I may not be entirely correct on that, which would bring the second portion in of 19. I'll check on that and loop back, but 35 sounds like a school year
Right.
payment. 19 would sound like the rest of the year if it's an entire year placement that will be paid. Or we enrolled another student and there was another student enrolled.
Starting in April.
I believe that may be the case, yeah.
So for 2 months, we paid $19,540 for a student.
That could be through the summer. I don't have that particular invoice in front of me. And I think the question on the table is, was it delinquent?
That is the question. That's what we're
And,
looking at. But even at 1.5% interest, it wouldn't amount to $19,540.
No, I'm unable to speak to it. It never made it to my desk for being delinquent. So there was never reaching out from their financial person to me. Typically, I would have been aware of it if it was a serious issue on their end.
If you
and-
could check into it and get back.
Yeah,
to us, then
absolutely. Well, I
Appreciate it.
think like everything there, when you have the number of payments going out the door, if we're down to just 2 that are being cited as being late, I think we take the win.
Well, I think it's a substantial amount of money, so I would want to know that we're not late on those kind of invoices.
Brad,
Yeah, I take it, Floyd, that Rock Point isn't complaining that they haven't been paid. Is that correct?
I have not heard anything from Rock Point
No,
about not.
yeah, neither have I. In my experience, I know with the out of district placements, there are a lot of moving parts with those things, and I think you're probably. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think that the school year issue and summer placement issue is likely an explanation for this, or any add-on services that the multidisciplinary team might have requested. Certainly, I think it would be useful to see exactly what it was for, so we're all kind of clear on that. But I suspect that certainly if Rock Point isn't complaining that they haven't been paid, then it's probably not an issue.
Any other thoughts on this monitoring report?
Lloyd, do you know the materiality for audit? Well, what's the materiality that our auditors are auditing at?
In terms of specific,
Posting and materiality, the two different levels. Usually there's a posting threshold and a high level materiality.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. No.
Could you elaborate on why that question's relevant? Please.
It
For
helps
the
to set a
non-finance.
benchmark for materiality.
What
for
does that
me,
mean?
In my head, so like if the auditors are looking at every transaction,
Mhm.
$15,000 or more. That's what they're considering material to potentially impact the financial
Okay.
statements. Being inaccurate from a materiality standpoint.
Okay,
There's different ways that auditors calculate those. I don't know if it's different in the education space, which is why I wanted to better understand it. And there's usually two different levels, which is the posting threshold for like journal entries and AP transactions, and then the overall materiality for potential for material in the statement on your financial statement.
Okay.
So I just think it's helpful for me, personally,
Sure.
the finance person, to understand that.
well, I figured if you're asking that question, it might be important to understand it myself, so.
There'd be a way that we could understand the validity of our own audit, right? But what it could miss or not, is that the short of it?
Yeah,
What the
like,
benchmarks are.
right, like.
What is the audit actually looking at?
Hmm.
So that when it's used as evidence, we know what is it covering and what isn't, essentially.
Right.
That's what you're getting at.
Exactly.
So that is helpful for us to be able to ultimately interpret the evidence. I was gonna say, I really like that we have some very defined data to use that's linked to this monitoring report. I think that gives us something that we can really directly look at. And so I think we'll see your point to say, how do we use that data fully is really useful.
Mhm. And typically, again, have to better understand from Floyd, if this is how their audit is done, they are looking at payments a couple months after the end of the financial statement period to see were their payments made, a few months later that actually pertain to the previous. So it just helps us know if we have any potential for unreported liabilities at the end of the year. Again, it's only a certain time period though. So if something doesn't get paid for 6 months after and the audit's completed 2 months after your end, it would miss it, but just something more information.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Any other thoughts about this monitoring report before I ask us the questions?
Because I guess I'm gonna ask Brad maybe, because he was saying he hadn't heard that like Rock Point School had complained, so. In theory, why, I guess, would a board member know unless they came out and asked us? The only way we would know if a vendor was complaining of late payment would be through the superintendent's office, right?
I think so. Brad, the question was sort of to you, like, would there be any reason directly you would know that Rock Point was upset or missing?
No, not at all, not at all.
Oh,
Okay.
It was just the way he phrased it, so I just didn't know. If
No, yeah, I mean, I was just saying if the complaint that there's a payment that's delinquent, I think a piece of evidence that would indicate delinquency or not would be whether Rock Point was complaining. I haven't heard any complaints, and as far as I know, there are no complaints on the board, on the table, so.
How would we know if there was a complaint about an invoice that wasn't paid?
A lawyer would call our lawyer.
Right, but how would the board know that, Brad, is my question.
I think, well, the superintendent would convey to us whether or not we're subject to a lawsuit or a potential lawsuit.
Or if it was anything other than a lawsuit, we wouldn't have knowledge of it, correct?
Well, it should show up in the monitoring report.
Once a
Right.
year.
Once a year, but I mean, that would be the obligation, right? I mean, when it talks about complaints from employees, government agencies, service providers, right?
Right,
Like, that's the opportunity to share that directly with the board, yeah.
In addition, there would most likely be a note in our audit stating that we are delinquent on payments, but based on their test samples.
that's what was after.
That's true.
Yeah, so there's sort of internal and external
Right.
controls, right, with the audit and then with the policies and the monitoring reports that we have in place. So ideally, one or both of those would be able to alert us to any of those potential issues. And in this case, it doesn't seem like either of them have flagged.
But the audit for this year hasn't been done, correct?
Right, so it's a year.
So maybe this auditing report should be postponed until or maybe this report should be, monitoring report should be postponed until we get the audit back, because it seems like we're acting a little prematurely on the current fiscal year. Wouldn't it make more sense to do it after the fiscal year is closed?
Well, except that falls into the category of sort of not moving forward with our obligations because there's something we might not know. And that's why we have, as Mike put it, the external control on spending. And certainly if the audit comes back and there's a problem with the $19,000 to Rock Point, then we address it at that point. But I don't see any reason to hold up, a decision on whether to hold up, moving forward with the monitoring report.
I'm not saying that for this year. I'm saying that looking at next year, that maybe the review of the monitoring report is postponed until after the audit is complete.
So they kind of coincide together.
Yes.
What is the time?
Okay, understanding that that would mean that the audit report, which I don't think we got until end of January of 24 for fiscal year 23. Right, it was that was the lag that we had with the audit report for the year ending June 30, 2023. So this report would include the audit that we received in January of this year. So if you push the monitoring report out there for that audit information, my sense is that you're a year behind.
All right.
More.
I think what I understood you as saying is for the next, following the next audit, when we get that report, that's when 2.3 is represented for compliance. Not this one,
Not this one,
yeah. It
but
would
the
be
next
due
audit
early.
will be reflective. I think I understand what you're saying, but recognize that the year ends in June.
Right.
The audit shows up in January.
And it takes 6 months to do an audit. I mean, I know we've been with this auditing for a long time, but 6 months
We
seems.
had our meeting today, actually, opening our audit for this fiscal year 24. The last 2 years, we've been January and I think March the year before. I think part of that was COVID and staffing. We requested this year that if they have staffing issues, that somebody else get pushed to the back of the line, because we have historically received our audit in October, which would, I think, probably coincide pretty well with this schedule. Happy to do it anyway, but I think that this is a short-term issue with audits these last years, and perhaps and the expectation is next year's we'll have the audit in place for the year finished at time of conversation.
And just as a point of protocol, how often do we revisit our auditing bids? Do we put them out?
Every
for
3
bid?
years.
Every 3 years. And how long have we been with this current auditor?
This is our third with 1 year extension on it.
Okay, so this would be the year that
This
we
will
would.
be our fourth. We're gonna extend 1 more year. And then bid.
Why is that?
We're not dissatisfied. We have the ability to do it. Our HR, our auditor, who audits roughly 70% of the schools. And when last we went out, I think we might have had one other group that bid on it. And honestly, it wasn't top of my list as we were working on budgets to go out and bid for an audit. We extended. There's no dissatisfaction with our auditor.
Right, but I think it's also a matter of protocol to keep things fresh. And so
Completely
you have a new set of eyes every few years. I mean, all the corporations I've worked with don't go any further than 3 years.
I heard 5.
3 to 5, yeah,
We've always maintained,
at least
yeah,
with the RFP.
set the RFP up so that they.
Are you
can
saying
start.
that you switch auditors?
We do, intentionally. But I guess my other question is there any way we can get this audit this year in October? I mean, that's gonna be critical to us, especially moving forward to the next year's budgets.
That's our request. I don't have a lot of control over their staffing and when they can complete it. I can request it. I requested it last year. I requested it the year before.
Thanks.
So, I mean, I'm
Thanks for doing it.
I'm not trying to dance on it.
No.
It's, as most of us, staffing is probably one of our greatest concerns. The same was true with our audit firm and, other audit firms as well. And they have, they believe they have solved their problem for this year. We should see an audit at the end of October.
Great, thank you, Floyd.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to add, number 3, fail to settle payroll and debts in a timely manner on the evidence presented. So while late charges is a great way to look at that. If we A, choose not to pay the late charges, which some businesses refuse to pay late charges, or B, I think we should be looking at invoice date versus pay date as well as evidence. Because some companies don't even charge late fees, for instance, so.
We-
That may not be the best.
From an audit standpoint, we don't look at invoice date. We look at invoice received. There are numerous invoices we receive from some of our local partners, people we work with, that might not invoice us for 30, 45 days once they finish the job. So if we take invoice date, we're already 15 days late.
Why would they finish a job, say, on June 18th and invoice you with a date prior to June 18th?
They invoice us, they finish the job on May 30th and invoice us on June 30th.
That's really bad accounting on their end. I'd start the 30 days from the date of invoice.
I can't control their accounting
Yeah.
structure. But I can control, our process and moving, we moved from 2 APs a month to 4.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of you are seeing all those warrants hitting now, significantly more often. Specifically to make sure that we were able to best support our partners. You know, we do have a desire to keep as many of our contracts and expenditures as local as we can. And we feel that there's a responsibility with that to ensure that we're paying on time.
And are there average payment terms or is it one by each depending? Like, does the district stick to net 30 or?
We work off a net 30, yeah.
I still think even if you use invoice date versus invoice receipt date, I don't care which one you use, if you compare that to the payment date, I think that would give us a better picture on how long it's taking us to pay our bills versus looking at the late fees assessed, because again, not every vendor assesses late fees.
Correct.
So.
And I think
Evidence is lacking.
we were under $10 last year in late fees.
So I've added that to the comments box as possible evidence that Patrick could add to this monitoring report. So not just using late fees for number 3, so possible evidence in invoice received date and account pay dates. As evidence. And then I also added in the comment section, looking for the information around tuition payments to Rock Point and just asking him to get back to us to clarify what happened there.
Our auditors, just to close that loop, our auditors use invoice received date for making sure that we're staying within our procedures
Okay.
on the net 30.
Thank you.
Okay. Good with questions or comments? Okay. So based upon the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable, yes or no?
Yes.
Based upon the information provided, does the board find that the data demonstrates accomplishment of this interpretation?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other thing is, if not, what other evidence does the board request? And I put that up in the comment section. Okay. So we have a motion to approve this. Can I please get a motion to accept the monitoring report? We have the motion, so we just need to. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring report 2.3 financial conditions and activities, please say aye.
I,
Opposed?
Aye.
Kathy and Melissa? Any abstentions? Daniela? The motion passes. Okay. In executive limitations, we have a financial report. Any questions for that?
Pretty skinny fund balances.
Then our goal. To speak to that for just a second, we do anticipate some of those items that we had set aside for June under capital expenditures. We may not be able to get those all in, so we may end up with a higher balance than that. I would predict we will end up with a higher balance than currently projected.
Which ones do we think we're not gonna be able to get to?
It's unlikely we'll get the parking lot paved this month.
Okay.
The playgrounds are dragging. And the pavilions. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to get those in and build out this year, for this fiscal year.
So Floyd, if we're not gonna get them in under this year and we've cut the construction budget for next year, do we have funds that we're gonna carry over?
We can't carry over funds.
Okay, so then we should have a surplus. Tell me how that works, I guess.
So if you have a fund balance, a surplus to the budget, the board will determine what to do with that. Typically, it's one of three, ed reserve, capital reserve, or back into the budget to lower taxes. And then that goes out to the community for a vote on the fund balance.
So would we have to do that in August for the primary? Would we have to have one of those options available
Be a town meeting.
till next March?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole in a fund balance,
Yeah.
is it sits unused until March and then is voted on to where it goes.
Does it have to set until March? Especially this year, there's a primary and the polls are open on the 13th of August.
Great question. I'm not,
You could set a special election. The district can set a special election. anytime.
right, and there's an expense allocated with that, and we have to have a audited fund balance, not a projected estimated fund balance. So it would
Where did it
need
go?
to be after the audit is complete, which,
It'll be done by August.
yeah, let's dance down that road again.
We'll be back in March again.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions about the financial report?
My only question with Floyd would be, the balance sheet is only showing assets and liabilities, so when you look at it, it doesn't balance. Can we get the balance, like full balance sheet in the financial report?
You want the entire, sure.
Pretty please. I like them to balance. Call me crazy. Might be the
Thing to
key,
do.
Is that it for questions for the financial update report? Okay. How about the superintendent's report? Any thoughts about that one? we'll just say for the Fine Arts Festival, the chorus production was very cute. If anyone was able to go see it, it was very well done.
The only thing I'd add, Aaron, is I thought the commencement was great. It was,
Wow.
very impressive and, kids were great.
Yeah, the Mount Aim graduation was really good this year. Okay. If there's no other thoughts about that, we'll move on to the board management and governance section. So our first item is an action item to approve the non-union support staff agreement, which was previously known as the director's policy. So we talked, Steve, a second,
Second.
Mike, any discussion?
Covers all the bases, all the issues I had.
I think, at one point I saw in here a reference to the five town school districts. I'm sorry I didn't highlight it.
5 town or 5 school?
I thought it said 5 towns.
Okay. Do a quick run through it again. Searchable copy.
Okay, I'm looking, I didn't see, I looked at the word 5, I didn't see a copy.
Okay, it might be in the other.
Only 5 I see is.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
Thanks to negotiators for taking care of this. It was a big body of work and a lot of time committed. So,
This, yeah, this was more of a admin.
Well, and the policy.
And policy and governance, yeah.
yeah,
Group effort. It's a group effort, yeah. Okay, all those in favor of accepting the non-union support staff agreement document, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Next is an action item to approve the meeting calendar for 2025. Need a motion to open the discussion.
So, second.
Melissa and then Mike. Okay. Discussion.
so one of the things when I was looking through, the school calendar notes all the traditional holidays as a vacation day now. But the contract that we just approved has each one of those days spelled out. So is that a problem at all, that we've got 2 different terms going?
I'm not sure I follow. So we've. Can you?
So if you look at the school calendar
Mhm,
that you gave us,
mhm.
all the gold days are just noted as vacation days, no school.
Yeah.
So the contracts that we just approved
Mhm.
are very specific as to specific days, so.
So there are some days that are floating holiday days and there are other days that are vacation days. So it depends on what was negotiated in the contract as to which ones are what, I believe. So a person could apply some chunk of time to vacation days and get paid for all those days. They can move a floating holiday to a different chunk of time to get paid for that day. So
Okay.
I think it's just depends on what's
Good.
negotiated.
Thank
So
you.
no, I don't think so. There's
Isn't the calendar for families and students primarily?
Meant to be more family facing.
Historically, the 2 board meetings that fall in February and April, do we have challenges, regional forum, given that it is on the vacation week?
Well, I think this is a little bit new because we're following a much different calendar this time than we have in the past, so we can always figure, like, we don't have to stick with this. If we want to move it, we can. This was just to give us a rough outline of when we would be meeting, but as long as we warn it properly, they're movable.
Okay. What are the requirements for us around town meeting day and for doing budgeting? Does that, like, do we have to meet? Yeah, when do we need to meet for a town meeting day, budgeting, communication?
Well, that would depend on when our budget's ready to present for our budget presentation. So I can't tell you that exactly off the top right now,
Okay,
but
so we don't have one that's like every year we do it the week
Correct.
before something?
right, yeah.
Typically ends up being an agenda item
Yeah.
during one of the first budget sessions.
Yeah.
Go through
Setting it.
the
And-
community engagement calendar for the budget.
And the Finance and Facilities Committee last week also set a goal for when things needed to be ready to roll.
Any other thoughts about this calendar? Yeah,
Who will be impacted by the vacation schedule? I think that is important.
go. At least two people?
I also think community members.
Yeah, probably. Mhm.
Yeah, good call.
So if you don't like having it on the vacation days, we could say that we're in February, we could do the 11th and the 18th. And in April, we could do the 8th and the 22nd. Are those the only two?
The 22nd in April is during vacation.
Sorry, 15th, sorry. Yes, you're right. I was looking at the highlighted ones, 8 and the 15th.
Mhm.
So we could make that adjustment if that's what people are feeling like, just to not run into it.
This feels, as a new board member in this particular season, it feels very optimistic to be like, imagine we could just have 2 meetings a month. Like, that sounds incredible.
We were there.
We've been there.
We were there. It's all dependent on what we need to do. So for February 2025, we'll move to keep the 11th and move it to the 18th. And for April, we'll do 8 and 15.
We might actually need to amend the motion. Who was first, Melissa?
Oh, gosh, what am I supposed to say to that? We're gonna amend the calendar for. Okay, I have a motion.
We have a motion on the table to accept it as it is.
Oh, so
So
what do
we
you
need to
amend it?
amend the motion
Okay,
to adjust the dates as discussed.
okay, amend the dates as discussed for in February. To hold meetings on the 11th and the 18th. And in April to hold them on the 8th and the 15th.
You vote to accept the amendment.
I'm sorry, can you, I thought you were moving February 11th to February 18th.
Nope, so it'll be 2 dates, so February 11th and February 18th. The 18th is moved from the 25th.
But you're moving, or
And
the
then,
11th and the 18th are 2 new dates?
nope, so the 11th and the 18th were the previous dates. The 11th is the original date.
I'm
The-
sorry, all I need for the motion is what you're changing.
Yeah, just
The
from-
18th from the 25th.
So the new date is the 25th.
New date's the 18th.
Okay, that's all I need to know. And I have April.
And then April, the new date is the 15th.
I second the motion.
Number first.
All those in favor of
First day.
amending the emotion for calendar dates, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I heard the VSBA sent out a Robert's Rules of Order laminated guide to all the board members, and I was just wondering if they have any more of those that we can have as new board members. Did you get yours? I did, it's right here, it's really great. What did you get? I don't know, maybe you're welcome to take it down there.
So we now need to
I don't know.
vote
On the amendment.
On the original motion. So,
Sorry.
so the original motion, we need to, there was an action item to approve the calendar. We need to vote that one down, because we don't want that one, right?
Nope.
No, you accept the
Just
amended.
vote to- Just
Vote
vote
is
to
amended.
accept the original motion as amended.
Okay.
Sounds
Vote,
redundant.
vote to accept the original motion as amended. Kylie,
Second.
second, Steve, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions, okay. Motion passes. Okay, those two things are done. Next we have an action item to approve committee charges. Does everybody have their committee charges ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Finance does. I don't have them linked here because we didn't have them all, I think, before we sent it out, but it's okay. Policy and governance, you have yours?
Yeah, I think we sent
Yeah.
the link earlier.
Yep.
They probably ought to all be distributed and linked and then voted on.
Okay, so why don't, we can continue to do our committee. We won't even meet again until August anyway for our committee, so we can continue to operate under our current charges until one is adopted. So if people feel like we haven't had time to look at them and ask good questions about them, we can just table this action item until we have all had a chance to look at them.
They are linked though, aren't they?
Those are updates.
Those are the meeting updates, not the
Mhm.
charges.
Mhm,
Oh, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
mhm.
Our charge is linked in there for what it's worth, but you wouldn't know and you shouldn't have. To be very clear.
Okay.
I wouldn't count that. But if you want to see it right now, you could navigate
I
there.
mean, we could go ahead if people thought they were okay and familiar with the different charges and wanted to proceed with this, that's fine, but typically they would have been linked in this action item. You'd had a chance to look at them before the meeting, had questions ready for the meeting.
Mhm.
So I move we table until August. A second for that motion,
Second.
Justin? All those in favor of tabling the action item to approve committee charges, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No extensions. Okay, that action item is tabled. Next on our list, we have accepting monitoring report 4.8 ownership linkage. I'm gonna get a motion, please.
After to discuss.
It's always a motion to accept and then we discuss and then we do the thing. It's just to open the discussion we have to have. Justin first,
Second.
Melissa second. Any discussion?
I found the 5 towns.
Was it in mine?
It was an interpretation of, let's see, conclusion. Under agenda minutes, go down to interpretation. And it says, the board shall facilitate communicative information sharing and open dialogue with owners from the 5 town community. With MAUSD.
I'm sorry, where is this? The non-union support staff agreement?
No, in this monitoring report,
Oh, I thought we were
So
on
in-
that.
No, an ownership linkage.
Gotcha.
Yes, I saw that too.
I got the majority of them.
You did a great job.
All right, I'll get that one
Oh,
out.
page 2.
Let me see it. Yep. Okay. got
I
that
knew
one.
I'd seen it somewhere.
Yeah, so.
All this paperwork.
Mm. Right, yep, I got it.
Thank you.
Yep, I'll amend that. Mhm. Any other questions?
I have like a broad question, I suppose, and maybe it brings in sort of the policy and governance committee.
Mhm.
I wonder if we want to have a policy in place or a plan of action when we don't report full compliance. Like, should something be triggered, broadly speaking, that like initiates a series of actions, right? Like the policy gets reviewed, or we discuss it at the next board meeting, or we like just something to allow us to acknowledge when we're doing well and when we're not living up to what our aspirations are. But beyond just acknowledging it, like formally initiate the next step, which is like, what the heck are we gonna do about it? And I don't mean this particularly for this ownership linkage, although it came to my mind here. Feels like that would be a nice general thing to have. And I don't know if that becomes something out of policy and governance or something for the board, but.
Good question.
Yeah, would that be a policy or would that be a board procedure?
Probably would have to look at how the policy is written to see how that works. Because there is a monitoring section in our policy. I believe that when you state non-compliance, you typically should propose the method for becoming compliant and some kind of time frame. That's a good question as to how do we feedback loop on that, you know, how do we loop back? How do we put it, how do we keep it on the task list? And how do we not miss it? You know, on what we need to accomplish down the road, that might not be a piece, policy and governance work plan item, but it might be a work plan item for another committee or the board, you know, as a whole.
Sure.
I think the last time, so I did this ownership linkage plan the last time and reported non-compliance, and it went right onto the policy and governance work plan essentially, but that was kind of ideal timing because that's when all that stuff is starting to come up anyway. And I authored one, so I think, I don't know if that's typical procedure, I just kind of did that, but it's worth looking at. How we define.
Yeah, and I think you did that because we didn't have a policy and governance committee at the time.
Right, we were
So,
just thinking about.
We're
it,
thinking of
yeah.
that, so. So this has come up, this ownership linkage plan has been on the PGC agenda. We got some feedback from the community engagement committee about things they wanted to adjust on it.
Mhm.
So it's on our work plan now to review it and decide whether or not we want to forward it to the board for full approval. If the ownership linkage plan is approved by the full board, then it becomes board protocol. It's a supporting document that supports the requirements in 4.8 that we have a plan.
Right.
Mhm.
And then, of course, that means we now have to live by the plan. So then there needs to be action taken to execute.
But the beauty of it being a procedure is it's more amendable than if it was a policy in
Right.
itself.
When I was reading through this, I was just thinking too, there's never really an opportunity for the board to discuss like, well, why is this difficult? Like, what are the components of this that we are struggling with, and just like have an actual conversation about the whys, which you indicated a lot, Erin, the whys of why it's challenging.
Mhm.
But like, I think it's really, would be really valuable to have a more in-depth conversation about how it all works,
Yeah,
Mhm.
because
And it
it's
could-
complicated.
and you know, ownership linkage isn't just a PGC issue or a community engagement issue, it's work of the whole board.
Exactly.
It might be that after we look at this, we could say, hey, look, in principle, we think this is okay, but we want to move this back to the full board for a broad discussion.
Yeah.
We have a couple of items on the PGC agenda that are like that right now. One is school choice. You know, one of the issues on school choice, do we want to pursue doing any more policy building? If the board's not behind the concept in general. That's just an example, but that's another nut to crack like that.
I mean, this particular report to me also spoke to something that maybe is a part of the board retreat, where there's time to talk about like the complexities and challenges of this in particular item, just kind of spoke to me.
Just wrote that down.
For what it's worth.
Mhm.
May or may not be there, but for what it's worth.
Yeah, I owe you guys a list of things to prioritize, but Any other thoughts about this report?
I really appreciate the care with which you went through and being really clear about our evidence and like what we had and what we didn't have. And I just keep thinking like, I'm really interested in discussing this more because I understand this is coming from policy governance as an approach. But it's funny to be elected for a community and to be the representative for that community and then be told that you don't represent that community, you represent everyone. Like it feels like it's a little bit of a conflict between our democratic election process of our board members and the expectations. But part of that is that policy governance wasn't designed for democratically elected boards. It was designed for churches and private schools, but they don't have the same process, but we do have it. So I'm just thinking that that'd be something that I'd like to look at too, because I know how important it is that we represent everybody, but then we're not just having open elections for it and for like the board as a whole, like anybody can run here. So balancing those two. And also, again, I really liked your report. You didn't tell us that we complied on everything.
No. And I didn't, the last time I did it either, and it was that this was the very first thing I was ever assigned as a board member. And then looking through and seeing we don't have one, I was like, oh dear. What did I get into? But yeah, here we are. Baby steps. Okay. Any other thoughts before I run through our questions? Okay. Any comments or questions you want me to capture on our official monitoring report sheet?
Further discussion is needed.
So based upon the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation, oh wait, hold on. There was one amendment. Okay, we can get to that. There's one amendment of just moving the 5-town to 4-town.
I'm sure it was a typo.
Now, I did get the majority of them, I just didn't capture that one. Okay, based upon the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation is reasonable, yes or no? Based upon the information provided, does the board find that data demonstrates accomplishment of this interpretation, yes or no? Yes. Okay. All right, so I will make that amendment on the report. The original motion was to accept it. Do we want to accept it or do we want to wait for it to be amended? And then accept. Or what do we do as amended?
Accept that as amended.
Okay. That mean we have to change anything, Steve?
Well, you need to amend it and resubmit it for the record.
Okay. But the original motion is fine. Sorry, as amended,
Except the
could
amended.
go back to
Maybe
what
the
we did
original-
before,
Maybe the original motion.
Justin.
You could ask them for a friendly amendment. So, just-
I move that we accept the ownership linkage as amended.
Good job. Second.
Kathy, all those in favor?
Yeah,
You just have to do it again. If he's doing a friendly amendment, you have to do.
No,
No.
For the
So
second
It's
version.
already
this
seconded.
is a minor
Just that.
thing.
You're changing the original motion.
Yeah.
All right, so all those in favor of accepting monitoring report 4.8 as amended, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next is an action item for adopting the resolution for borrowing revenue anticipation note in the amount of $6 million.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Wait, so I want to make sure I'm following
Mhm.
that. This is Are we opening it up for discussion?
Yes.
Is that what we're doing? Okay, thank you. Sorry. I will get there, I promise.
It's okay. So in the chair notes, they give you a little bit of context. So this was an item that we tabled in May because we weren't sure if we're gonna have a budget and where we're borrowing from and so on and so forth. So Floyd can give us a refresher of what the two types were if we need to.
The two types.
There was, so, or we could just talk about what the RAN is, the revenue anticipation note. If people need a refresher of what that is.
You want me to jump forward?
Yeah.
On this, or are there
Why don't
specific
we?
questions?
I do have a specific question I'll throw in there. Maybe you were gonna hit on
We
it.
can start there.
6 million. Through a dartboard, how did we come up with that number?
It's a great question. We're submit a cash flow analysis that the state has us use. We can't take more than, I think we could have taken up to $7.1 million this year. And 6 has been sufficient for us in the past. But it is a computed number based on the cash flow analysis coming from the state ed fund. Based on the cash flow expenditures on a monthly basis. I can send you that if you'd like.
How much interest do we pay on that, Floyd?
It actually, if we don't, well, let's back up. We have two types of, I'll dive in and
Okay,
then
thank
address that after, if that's okay. Having a no budget, our option was a current expense note, which would have been any borrowing we had, we immediately pay interest on it. A revenue anticipation note, we're giving, we take 6 million, and what we use from that, we pay an interest charge on. We pay interest on the 6 million as a whole, but if we don't use it, we can arbitrage it and we receive interest payments on it. If you look at our revenue for this month, we're at 270,000 of revenue. That reflects a large portion of this RAN that we didn't have to hit through the whole year. So it's been a positive cash flow. We're making money on it. So I think that answers that question. So the revenue anticipation allows us to dip in when our cash flow is significantly challenged. Typically after the September 15th payment from the state and before the December 15th payment for the state. That is typically our cash flow challenge. We were in a little bit better position last year because Lincoln paid some money. So we received a cash flow infusion because of tuition. Expect that to continue and be beneficial to us. But those are the two types of notes we could have gone forward with. We delayed to this month in the hopes of having a passed budget, which is the gatekeeper to allow us to get a revenue anticipation note, because now we have revenue because we have a passed budget. 6 million, to Melissa's question, is a number that we have not ever come close to needing. And because we can generate revenue from it, it makes sense to continue to use that. We have bids out currently with 3 different banks for rates. We have consistently worked with the community bank, the old merchants, with great success. Their service is wonderful. We bank with them currently. And I was on the phone with their loan officer today, walking through some of the questions on the RFP for that RAN. Pretty simple, you know, it's a line of credit that we can hit if we need it. So there's a quick overview of it. Any questions jumping out from there?
I feel like this is a dumb question, but I gotta ask
No,
it
that's
so I
fine.
know the answer. So this is something we typically do annually because of that cash flow situation you just mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this item?
And the place that the money's parked or you're earning interest on it, is that driven by the entity in which we take the loan out with? And so in the agreement, the interest on that is like slated in there, like it would say you're gonna.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Thanks.
So there's a stated payment, a stated rate of return.
Yep.
And then that gap is where we have the opportunity to generate that additional revenue.
Thank you.
All right. Good. All those in favor of adopting the resolution for borrowing the revenue anticipation note in the amount of $6 million, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion passes. Next is an action item to authorize myself, the board chair, to sign that revenue anticipation note. Again, this was a complimentary thing that was tabled from the 28th. to
So
now.
moved.
Kathy,
Second.
Melissa, any discussion? All those in favor of authorizing the board chair to sign the revenue anticipation note, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. Okay, the motion passes. Next, we have an update from Katrina about our district advisory council. So that goes over the strategic plan.
So you may remember that earlier in the fall, we decided to appoint a district advisory council internally to help move the work of the strategic plan. The strategic plan was to be sunsetting at the end of this school year. And after 8 meetings and lots of great conversations with our team of about 15 or 16 of us, it was determined we need more time, shockingly. So we surveyed the whole staff. We got 56 responses to kind of see where in all of our conversation and what we discussed as a team, would they agree we should really prioritize the work. The sentiment was pretty strong from the folks who responded that we're doing a lot of work right now and let's not do something brand new. So they prioritized in our current strategic plan, which is now going to be alive and well for another year. I can put this in the notes for Vicky too, so you can have this in writing. They prioritized what had already been a priority in expertise and learning, objective 2, which is that all students experience an aligned proficiency-based curriculum with varied assessments that measure and monitor their individual growth and outcomes. There was a lot of conversation over these last 8 months around how do you continue to refine and integrate the work we're doing in our academic settings with also the support that students need to be accessible and inclusive and feel like they can access their learning. So we talked a lot about the social emotional learning objective 1 as well, which is students apply knowledge, attitude, skills necessary to manage emotions, show empathy, maintain positive relationships, make responsible decisions, and achieve their goals. So a lot of the means behind that we've already put in motion are things around, accessing the transferable skills. Here at Mount Abe, having a PLP where you're doing a lot of goal setting for yourself and getting that time to reflect, particularly in the upper grades. How can we do more of that in the lower grades and then not always treat accessibility to classroom materials separate from their academic standards, right? So how are we integrating both of those pieces has been the rich conversations we've had this year. The newer priority area, because we had a lot of conversation about equity. Obviously, everything that we're talking about falls under the need to ensure that objective 3 under equity, where all students experience inclusive school cultures and instructional practices that work for their learning. So that was the newer one that was prioritized. So sort of a merging of 2 that we already were focusing pretty heavily on, and then this additional equity priority in objective 3 that already exists. We spent a lot of time wordsmithing in our first few meetings, a lot of debating about measurable targets and just decided that that's gonna take more time and more input than this team of 15 all by ourselves. So sticking with this beautiful document that took 3 years in the makings and hundreds of input from people, hundreds and hundreds of people giving input, gives us a little bit more time to be able to do this better. It's really the measurable targets that are tripping us up a little bit. We can say aspirational goals and then bring those down to actionable objectives. But what are our measures? And so there was a lot of conversation about what do we already have? What are some of the reports that we've seen over the last few years, particularly the MTSS safety study that was done with a consultant. There's a lot of good information in there. We have members on this district advisory council who were part of that work. We just recently got some information from a team that, an outside team that focuses on particularly special education. There are some pieces we need to unpack out of that can help us really understand better how to identify measurable targets that are meaningful. Will help you in the long run because our dream has always been that a lot of the measurable targets that you see in the ends monitoring report sometimes feel disconnected to what's in the strategic plan. So that's been in the back of my mind during all these rich conversations. Whatever we identify as a measurable target, let's make sure it's something that we feel confident in, that gives us a broad scope of all of our kids, and we can incorporate that in the ends monitoring report in the future. So that's our plan. We are under waiting for some turnover in terms of we've got some people who are not returning either to the team or to the district. So we've put out an application process for folks who are interested in joining, and the commitment is really, we're hoping for a 2-year commitment on the committee and to not have everybody leave at the same time, right? So there's sort of that, you know, some of you are leaving, but not all of you are leaving, which kind of means for some people, there might be a 3-year commitment going on. And a couple of them were okay with that. But also a lot of conversation that just meeting monthly for 2 hours isn't gonna move us fast enough to really have a product that we can then share with the whole organization, not just internally, but also we had a lot of conversation at last week's meeting about maybe having more representatives from our staff on this team to join the community engagement committee to let them know what ideas we're having related to the strategic plan, as we did when we first created it in that 3-year process. So all that to be said, because we're going to give ourselves an extension on the strategic plan, it also serves the purpose as our continuous improvement plan for the Agency of Education. So I've been doing that since we have the strategic plan. I just didn't know I was going to be doing the exact same one for 1 more year. So I will be using those priority areas that they just identified and building that into what's called the CIP for the Agency of Ed, which is due on June 30th. That's my update.
Thank you.
It's been great conversations, much more to come and much more involvement with a larger group of stakeholders. Although I'll say having even 56 teachers and staff members respond to a survey the last week in May was pretty awesome. So people care about this work, which is a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you. With that one? Okay. Next is an update from Finance and Facilities.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll just jump in. You can see the link to the minutes. Primarily, we spent time trying to merge the facilities and the finance charges, and so that's been tabled for the full board, but you'll see that before the next meeting. And you can kind of get a sense of how we attempted to do that. And then the focus of our conversation really pivoted towards what the heck are we going to do for budget process for next year. Knowing that we're maybe already behind where we'd like to be. And so we discussed some broad buckets of possible places to look into, things in the Levinson report. And then perhaps most germane to the update, we approved a motion, if you will, that we'd love to have sort of the whole board weigh in on. I don't know if you want to do that now or in the budget discussion for the next one. Oh, sorry, that's
Letter K.
yeah, letter K. So I'm not sure exactly how you
Okay.
want to go about that. It feels
Why
like we
don't
might
you,
be veering into that, but
okay,
I'm happy to like throw it in here now if we want.
yeah, why don't you do that and then we'll
Yeah.
chew on it later.
So we realized that there were lots of different places that we could go. And little amount of time to think about how we're gonna restructure budget to reflect some of the conversations that we've been having over the past few months. But one thing jumped out to us is sort of we needed more information and felt really pertinent to move on quickly. and that, related to the central office, right? So it feels like we're kind of in a little bit of limbo with the failed vote. And so the thought was that we really wanted to be in a position where we had information and could start to develop ideas as a board and as an administration as to like what those solutions would be. And so the motion sort of focused on a few things. One was to understand a little bit better the scope of the central office. So obviously Patrick had shared with us a list of personnel, which was super helpful. But we wanted to know like what was the range of sort of central office staff that have to day by day interact with each other in person, right? So what is the smallest size of a central office we could envision in terms of thinking about space to what the current size is, just so we had a sense of what options might be available. So that was one factor that we just wanted more information about. We wanted presumably to have some options, maybe some novel options for what the next steps might be for the central office. And then sort of incorporated or tangential, but that may be really important to this. We also wanted to know what were the options for sort of shared central office responsibilities across districts. So how many people do we have right now? How many need to be in the same space every day? So we know kind of the bare minimum of space, what those options might look like, and maybe moving forward, how do we maybe manage central office by thinking about shared services has been done, certainly in the context of food services. But perhaps in terms of some central office locations. Yeah. What?
Do you want to include in that people that are not currently housed in the central office that might be better poised in there? That seems.
Yeah,
like
I think
separate.
I think that our idea was to basically understand like ideal scenario in terms of where people are housed, minimum scenario, so that we as a board would maybe have a better sense of what kind of options we could reliably pursue and what the consequences of pursuing this option versus that option, if that makes
I
sense.
just wanted to clarify. Staff that are not housed there, that are often in the central office for numerous reasons.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of context that I think would give us on the Finance and Facilities Subcommittee and then also the board as a whole, more rationale for being able to evaluate proposed solutions for central office space facilities. Thanks to the So that was the kind of thing that we thought, look, there's lots of buckets that we want to look at this year and moving forward. But given that that was at the forefront of kind of community discussions and a previous vote, it felt like that was maybe lower hanging fruit that needed to be addressed. And so that's where we settled. And then maybe the last thing on the update that's worth pointing out is we really wanted, I think we collectively agreed that we wanted to try to move this budget process as early as possible, even if it means draft budgets that we know might look very different than the final budget. So trying to figure out how we as a committee and as a board can work with the administration to get some of those sort of frameworks in place earlier, even if we're not sure what the big changes may or may not be. Otherwise, we felt we really something quite similar to this year where we take the time to kind of fully evaluate everything, but at that point now we're at the time where the budget's already needing to be voted on, right? So trying to figure out how do you walk that balance of sharing preliminary information, even though it might not be where we fully end up, but so that we can kind of incorporate a longer dialogue. I'm happy if others on the committee want to jump in, but that to me captures most
Can
of
I
it.
add one small point? My last meeting with the business side of the AOE, they are trying to figure out how to get us those drivers earlier. They recognize how difficult it is for the school boards to find out in January that everything they've worked on doesn't really work.
Perfect. Exactly. So hopefully we slowly move to a place that actually makes some sense. So that's the broad scope of what we're talking about.
Boyd, where are we with Truax and Collins? We contracted with them for an assessment of all of our buildings. Where are we
I
at?
think
with
they're
that?
finalizing that. I don't think it's much further out.
Okay,
So I'm not sure when the delivery date is on that. I'll reach out to Truax in the morning.
Great.
To send that to Aaron.
yeah, I was trying to remember whether we said would they be ready in September. I thought that's what we'd originally talked about last year, was that we could shoot for September
Yeah.
this year.
I think their visiting of the schools is fairly complete.
Yep.
I think they're diving into what the systems are that are in the schools is fairly complete. Now it's just a matter of what's the best path forward on some of these assessments.
Right, that's what we were asking for.
And for context, that this is a full assessment of facilities, is my understanding, across the
Right.
district,
Well, all campuses.
all campuses, which presumably might provide some of the information that we might need to also help evaluate potential central office solutions.
Priorities, yeah.
So thanks to the facilities group from last year for helping kickstart that.
All right, next we have an update from policy and governance.
So we spent a lot of the meeting, sort of going over what we're doing and how we're gonna go about it and what's on the work plan. And then going through, our current policy list, what's up to date, what's not up to date. And we've actually been through, preliminary review of all the policies, and compared them to what is current on the VSBA website. Those are off, for administrative review, now, and it would come back to us with any comments and issues. Before we would make the final determination to send them, back to the board. We have one policy B8, Aaron, that came out of these minutes that needs to go on an agenda at some point. And we sort of just touch base quickly on what's on our work plan other than basic policy review. And if you look at the top of our agenda, you'll see we have a work plan and our policy and procedures list. And if you click on those, you can go through what's on our agenda and where we are with our current policy discussions.
The links in the policy and governance, update, you can't click on them, so we can't get to any of that. So just stating that, so we just need to refresh it.
Okay. I will see if I can get that resent to you. I don't know,
Sorry.
Jennifer. is out.
Yeah.
She's in tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know what happened in the, it may be that when it was converted to a minutes format, that
Yeah.
unlinks
A lot
something.
of it, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just ask Jennifer to double check that.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other updates for PNG? And then updates from community engagement. You want me to talk, Barb?
Sure.
We've had a pretty quick discussion, but we did some talking about the DEI work that we had, the board had given Patrick the objective of finding some people who could come in and do a sort of holistic look at what MAUSD has for DEI supports, what we have working, what we don't have. So there's a couple people in the mix for that. And at the time that we had discussed it, we weren't releasing the names of them yet because we weren't sure if they were fully committed or on board or what we were doing with them. So more to come about those. We also had a small budget discussion, mostly because we want to be supportive about how we move forward with discussions around budget and how we get to community faster and that kind of thing. So I was looking forward to hearing what F&F had to say today so that when we go back, we can be consistent, yeah. And making sure that we're aligning a lot faster than we have in the past. Then we also had a long discussion about sort of what we're gonna do as agreements in our own group, because we talk about some pretty heavy topics that are emotionally charged and spark a lot of personal feelings. So we talked a lot about how we're going to look at those, how we're gonna move within those things that come up and what that'll look like for us, and then try to carry those ideals over to whatever community engagement we're doing outside of it too. outside of the CEC. So hopefully that list of agreements is out to everyone who participated in that meeting and certainly can be available to whoever wants to look at it. So hopefully they'll come back with feedback about those agreements and we'll have something to move forward with at our next meeting. Did I miss anything?
That's it.
All right. Our next item is a discussion for fiscal year 26. And does anybody have any thoughts about what Mike had to say about the F&F committee's recommendations about what we look at, how we start it? Because we are behind. Yeah.
Is the central office supposed to be part of the new budget? Like, or wrapped up into the budget? Because during the vote in March, it was broken out as a separate line item.
I guess we don't know.
I don't know.
It is really the idea, until we have a sense of what the options are for that. We don't know whether that would be just a part of the standard budget or whether it would have to be something else. I guess in the context of this last year, it had to be outside because it was the purchase of a new space. And I think that required separate voter approval or disapproval as to what. If it's not that, I don't think it has to be disentangled from the budget itself.
As you were talking, I was like, oh man, I hope that we all take the community suggestions about just putting central office into Beaman or whatever. I know we're gonna look at other avenues, but it seems like not to jump ship or not to jump ahead. It's like, it should just go to Beaman and that should be the end of the discussion. You know, like just based on community feedback over the last 4 months.
Yeah, I think that's why, we were basically saying, let's get information from the admin about like what ideal options are, what.
We have a
what
lot of
options
leads
are.
at Munsville.
Exactly. And so once we have that information, once the facilities report comes in, it feels like we can then try to merge the sort of wants, needs, desires with the realities of the buildings and the community input to try to figure out like what options make the most sense.
And it's not so long ago, I had just requested Lloyd help me find a document recently, that broke down the different options that were put on the plate before the choosing of Munsell. Which obviously are potentially not the same value as they were, was it 2 years ago? But I mean, that's still a viable document that kind of brings 3 or 4 different options.
I think what's driving it though at this point is how much square footage do we really need? You know, what is the bare minimum we can get away with and how many people are in the office full time? We have a lot of people that are still working from home or they're working remotely in other schools. We have a lot of open classrooms, a lot of open space that can accommodate it rather than having to do maybe such an extensive. So once we know that, we'll have a better idea.
Yeah.
When do we look at the first revision of the budget? Was it October? Cause I'm trying to think.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably-
it was about October, yeah. So hopefully sooner than that, right? So that's the whole idea, is that we're not gonna wait until October to then be like, oh shoot, what are our options?
And how much does Montpelier change between October and March?
A lot.
Well,
Like if we
the
start-
Hill bill was overrode this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
That's the final number.
Yeah. It's a lot, but I guess that's to Mike's point, right? If we're releasing information as we have it and being really clear about how it impacts the budget and what we're looking at and what pieces are fluctuating or not fluctuating. I think people will feel a little bit more informed throughout the full process than just getting sort of a lump at one time. It's highly complex. Yeah, Liz.
Well, there are also solutions that are not dependent on the numbers from the state and more dependent on getting the study of our buildings. Something that I just would like the board to consider is that if there were, even if the vote were denied, if there were an option on the table or an option on the vote in November to say, have New Haven be central office and pre-K. Move the pre-K program over there. And that, as we know, would be considered school closure. So it would need a town vote. If we don't really need anything from the state to move forward on putting, I think I'd like us to figure out what options we might like on the ballot in November. And then if that were to pass, we could actually build the budget counting on some savings related to bringing like services together. So, and if those were to not pass, at least there was the option to find some savings that way was given to the community and kind of just another chance to take another direction. Other than that, anything voted on in March wouldn't even be able to be considered for budget savings until the following year.
So Liz, just to be clear, to move central office to Beaman would not require a vote of the populace because we wouldn't be taking over the school. It's only looking at the second floor.
Right,
So that
and
was not-
if we were to have it be like the central for pre-K and then run all the pre-K services out of there, that would require a vote. Like to really think bigger and think about moving services together to create more access to the adults that provide those services for students. And reduce some of the redundancy of that's going on across the district. So I don't know that that's possible, but I wanted to at least say it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts about this discussion item? Things that people feel like we should be looking at starting right away in August?
I think we definitely, like, this is one of the big pieces of the puzzle for the budget. We definitely need some community time to see where our community stands, and build in access, because again, we could make a decision that without community input, and then we take it to the polls, and so just making sure.
So that was a discussion point, was how do we engage with the community team so that we're not doing like one session for the budget and then another session with the community for something else, like making it a fruitful, one-time thing, kind of like we did recently,
Yeah.
sort of. And engage so we can work together to plan that, so we have that feedback, absolutely.
Because this specifically the concept of the district where it's being housed is a hot topic. And I think it might need some of its own intentional conversation and space, as well.
I think also we need to consider what will happen to the students that are in New Haven. And I may have missed something, like where would they be merged in to the district? Which schools would accept them? Would it be choice? Would it be a designated school? I think the community would want to respond to those questions too. It's not just about the central office, for sure.
And I love all those things. I love all the things that you're saying, and I'll keep listening. And I think that's right. All of those questions will come up. But what will also come up is that we spent construction reserves, we spent education reserves. We've got some necessary spending to do. And I'm sure the insurance will go back up again next year. So we will be in a position next year. And if it's not building shifts or some kind of shift like that, I don't see how there's a lot of what we just experienced, I believe we will experience again, but without the backup of reserves. And so if we don't have some other option, regardless of all of those great questions that we would want to try to answer to the best of our ability. And one thing I will say is sometimes, after, sometimes there are things that are worked out after something has been approved. So we got to think about what are the big ticket items that we could use to reduce the budget next year and still maintain programming and access to services that people have made it clear that they want. So that's really why I'm making that uncomfortable conversation kind of get pushed forward, or I'm hoping that it will be. And I'm sorry for interrupting whoever just started.
I think that was me, but that's okay, Liz. This is Daniela. I just wanted to say that I'm agreeing with all this thinking ahead as we're looking at the calendar and we're looking at what's gonna happen next with the budget I'm hoping that we can think proactively early on about how to start enlisting some of that community engagement, like what you wrote about in the ownership linkage, and about the ways that, most of the districts around here, my understanding is that they've been doing things like a weekend get together. I say get together because less formal than the like board structure, but having lots of different ways that community members can participate. And I was thinking we're probably gonna have to do that in the fall and in the spring, not because I'm just so excited to spend all this time getting to know my community, which I am, but more because we're already hearing that's gonna be a hard year ahead. So I'm just planning for that. So we should be, is that September when we start doing that work, or is it August that we're? Welcome back, have some ice cream, come talk to us about Beeman.
Yeah, I think as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I really think we're already sort of behind because we've had a lot of work to do for this budget. So if we can sort of emulate some of what we've already started and do it better and more efficiently, then.
Can I ask one question about the budget with what you said? So the lawmakers overrode Scott's veto of the state yield bill. And so that means that it went ahead and ours stays, our budget doesn't get changed now, right? Still just trying to understand Vermont.
Our budget won't change. Our dollar amount that we're spending was voted on,
Okay,
and that dollar doesn't change.
okay,
What was in flux is the yield, which takes that dollar amount divided by less revenue, divided by the number of students, and then factoring the yield into that to get a tax rate. That was the number that was in the yield bill, which is taking all that through the Rube Goldberg wonderness to get to what our tax rate is in a community. Layering on top of that is we have two towns that are reappraised, and they have a likely interim CLA that is yet to be determined on their tax rate. So when we say it's done, it's sort of kind of almost done.
yeah, this is bananas. System, not us, the system. Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, yeah, it's done on the state level now.
Something that might help our work on facilities and finance would be maybe to get a sense of the board about like big picture, like what are we trying to do? And I could envision a number of possibilities, like we could take this past budget and say, man, if we don't do something huge and do it now, we're in trouble. And that would mean we'd really have to be pushing forward big ideas for the next budget, which to Liz's point, might even be big ideas before a vote in November, if the big change requires engagement and approval from the electorate. So that's like the one extreme. The other extreme, which I don't think anyone's gonna advocate for, is like, we just do the same nonsense, right? Like, we just keep doing the same thing. Like, that's not gonna work, right? So somewhere between completely changing things and not changing things at all, I don't know where we as a board sit, right? Are we trying to make a few meaningful changes that we think we can do in a short time frame while exploring bigger structural changes that aren't for this next budget, but for the following budget? Are we trying to get those big ones in this, but like, I just don't know where we're at. And that makes it difficult, I think, for us in terms of our planning, to get a sense of like, what is the scope of structural or programmatic changes that we really are considering? And what's the scale, the time scale that we should be considering them on. Not to just throw a huge open-ended question, but to do actually exactly that.
Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mike, just to respond briefly to that, one of the things that, we've struggled with is that we don't, with respect to the earlier efforts to close and or consolidate, one of the criticisms, and I think one of the reasons why that effort was resoundingly defeated is because we never really tried the incremental steps before sort of presenting to the to the voters a big picture, meaning closing a couple of elementary schools and merging with a local district. So I think we need to really be careful about, I appreciate Liz throwing something out there for discussion, but our previous experience suggests to me that if we come forward with some sort of a top-down approach to, repurposing Beaman and just sticking the administrative staff in Beaman because there's space there, I think that we are treading on very thin ice with the voting public, unless there's some meaningful way for that public to generate support among the voters before it gets proposed by us. So I think, as you outlined earlier, Mike, in terms of what the Finance Committee talked about, last week, I think that's the right approach. We need to gather the data and figure out what the various options are, so that we don't fall into the trap of proposing something that is not evidence-based. And again, while I appreciate sort of other ideas about how to deal, for example, with our facilities, it has to flow from the data, and not just sort of wishful thinking or perceived ideas among us. Again, I really believe it needs to be data driven.
I agree, and it just got me thinking, like, we meet tonight. We don't meet in July, there's a retreat in August. And then by the time we are putting in place community input opportunities, we're like October. Maybe, so that. I don't know,
We have the same.
feels
We
almost
said
like
the same thing at our meeting.
Yeah.
we need to like make a plan tonight.
Yeah.
So that we can implement it as soon as we come back.
When you say make a plan, you make a plan for making a decision or making a plan for what we're gonna do?
Like, how, it feels like we need a meeting really early fall.
Yeah.
To get that input, cause it took us 3 or 4 weeks last time. And if we don't have that discussion until, say, the end of August, we're really short on time.
Yeah, so for what it's worth, just to give a little more context for our meeting, we thought we might been trying to get information from the administration before end of August, where we would meet as a subgroup, a committee, or whatever we want to call them. But we also sort of planned to generate or populate a list of possible areas to explore as a subcommittee, we're called. Of like pulling from the Levinson report, pulling from our community engagement of like, here are some buckets that we as a whole board might consider. And so to Brad's point about kind of incrementally finding those, if we could then share that information back early September, right, at the full board meeting, then maybe we'd have a sort of path for, these are the 2 or 3 things that we as a board think we want to get more information or pursue. If that makes sense. And again, it feels tight. I'm with you. But maybe that's doable in the sense that if we're not looking to sort of radically restructure things for this budget, right, but rather start to identify some pretty big buckets that we can do that don't require, say, a vote in November, right? We would then have time to work through September, October, November to really chew over what those changes might be in the process of actually generating that budget. You know, my only hesitation, and I think I fully agree with what Brad said, is I think as we do that, we nevertheless need to convey that those bigger changes are being considered, like, we need to somehow be able to communicate with the community that we're working long-term and short-term simultaneously. So that there's maybe movement towards that, and we can get that kind of feedback that we need. But also to maybe limit some of the pushback that may occur next year, where even if we make some subset of changes, the bottom line may or may not be all that different when it's all said and done, right? As compared to some of those bigger structural changes that might come later.
I think you hit the nail on the head about the potential theme of an input meeting or bringing the community together, which is what are the short term for and what are the long term? And that's like the two questions.
Yes, no, exactly. And I think if we can have that as a framing,
Yeah.
it shows we're building off of what we've done the last few months, right? Which were the immediate term. What are we gonna do for now to get a budget, which we've done? Thank you, everybody. And then what's the short term?
I am a little bit nervous, like this, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off either, but I am a little bit concerned about the fact that we put out some communication about basically this budget is to say we're in a crisis situation and we're trying to get through and we're going to look at major changes for this coming year. So I think how we then are able to communicate why we're looking at short-term and long-term feels really important about how we communicate that as broadly as possible.
Sorry.
It's
go
a
ahead, Brad.
question for Brad. I'd like you to clarify the data that you'd like to see. That would
I'm sorry,
drive-
clarify the what?
Could you clarify the types of data that would drive our changes?
Well, the data that Mike was talking about that grew out of our conversation in the Finance and Facilities Committee. Essentially what the range of options might be for housing central administrative staff, how many staff, where they're located, and what this square footage needs is, and all that kind of data. I might want to also add to that in terms of getting community input on sort of bigger picture and sort of changes on the scale that Liz proposes. I'm not sure that having putting out an announcement that there's going to be a community meeting on X date at the end of August or early September, or a series of them is going to be something that will be very useful or really inform our decision making. And I'm just going to throw this out there. We might have to convene, some sort of a community committee along the lines of the bond committee from 5 or 6 years ago, or the merger committee, which sort of brought together community members, teachers, board members, a whole bunch of folks, and systematically to look at where we might be heading from a facilities use perspective, and a cost containment perspective. I mean, this would be something that would be, I think, fairly rigorous, undertaking, and would have to be serious in order to generate the kind of public support that would, give us a better chance of having making a recommendation that resulted in a favorable vote. So, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't think it's at all realistic that we can do anything with respect to making significant infrastructure changes and where we house people and where we educate people, our kids, in time for a meaningful November vote. I don't see that at all.
Kristen?
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with Brad on those points. Just thinking about the committee that was put together, just for the possible merger, and that's such a big thing. And I think that the community involvement piece is something that's really quite huge. And it's, I don't know, I think it's a big beast, it's a big animal, but you know, it's definitely something where it would be much greater than just, you know, having, you know, a handful of meetings. You know, no disrespect to the conversation. It's just, it's a big topic, and it's a very big elephant in the room for a lot of people.
One of the things we also talked about in the committee meeting was making sure that teachers have the opportunity to come and give us direct input. You know, they know what works, they have great ideas. We need to respect that and give them a venue with which they can communicate with us. What are the cost savings that we could incur and how can we do it?
Any other thoughts on this discussion? All good things.
I feel like we need like a week-long retreat. I don't have the ability to do a week-long retreat, but I'm like, I don't know how we're gonna get everything done. You guys, you're quitting.
That's not funny. What I'll do is I'll type up some of these ideas we just had. I'll shoot them back out to you guys. I'll let you chew on them. I also owe you a list of priorities for what we're gonna do for the retreat, and perhaps there's some way to plug and play some of these into that.
Lloyd, when do we know what the insurance rates are going to be for next year?
We get a heads up in December, and then then they're approved in January.
Right before the vote.
Right before the vote, yeah. Nothing lines up well.
It might be November, December.
And we don't know what teacher salaries are gonna be until
May.
May.
Are we up, we're up for
Right.
professional stuff?
That's up for negotiation.
So professional staff negotiations will start. Okay,
So I don't really feel panicked about meeting a timeline right away, because all of these variables
lots
are
of
hanging out
variables,
there and,
Mhm.
yeah.
So we tackle first what is not a variable.
You can still make pretty educated guesses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we can use what support staff negotiated for as sort of a base of what I would imagine professional staff will also shoot for. Okay,
Recognizing you want to be careful about tipping your hand.
okay. So, the next is public comment on our agenda, but before we jump there, I just wanted to make it public that Steve has put in his resignation for the board effective tonight. So this is our last meeting with Steve. So everybody thanks Steve for being here for 8 years, right, Steve? Yeah, very
And at
sad.
Hannaford, so.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so there's a couple of shoes we need to fill. Yeah, Brad?
Yeah, I just want to say three things. First, I think that a sad thing, and it's sad that the smartest person on the board is leaving us. So that's a problem. And the second thing is a scary thought that all of a sudden, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm probably the longest serving board member after Steve leaves. So that's kind of scary. And then the third thing is just a grateful thought. And I think, you know, Steve, you've been great on the board, totally engaged, and I've really appreciated working with you on it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Kristen as well.
Yeah, Kristen.
Yeah, just to echo Brad again. You know, I'm kind of a newbie still, and I just really, I really appreciated all of Steve's support when I came on board, and just invaluable resource. It's a big hit to the board. You're going to be missed, my friend, and yeah, many thanks, and just so appreciative of everything that you've done.
I will say that I'm not going and hiding under a rock. I'm not gonna disappear. You know, any questions that anybody has about anything that, you know, we started on the committee or whatever, feel free to contact
And
me.
what's your cell number again?
And if I forget in the middle of a meeting.
now
how
I'm
to
very
remember things.
grateful that
I
we started
can't,
most of
I
our
can't
meetings.
correct Robert's rules.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going
Well.
on with my motion.
No, I'll have to figure that out, I guess.
Do it.
Thanks, Steve. Alright. So,
My wife thinks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Super appreciative. So I'm gonna open the floor for our last public comment, and then we're going to actually close out this meeting and do our executive sessions, so we don't have to keep jumping back and forth. We only have one executive that requires any action. So we will have to come out, do that action, obviously, and come out of everyone, but hopefully we can just all remain here instead of jumping spaces. So, yeah, go ahead, Shauna.
Hi. Thank you so much, Steve. You've been one of the board members that it's always been nice to look back at the minutes and see comments from you, because you've been a very, very productive and very helpful member of the board to the community. So I appreciate all the service. So as far as just questioning how it works with executive sessions. Do you come out and then go back in after, I mean, because I am saying that I would like more information as to the reason to go into executive session, or is that something that it's already decided to go in? Because I know you guys vote to go in. So potentially, like, if I leave, but then you guys vote not to go into an executive session, is that something that could be ascertained before the public leave? Because each one you have to vote to go into, correct?
Yeah.
2/3 vote.
I've never run into that situation.
Okay, well, just checking, because I mean, that is, all right, so. Anyway, I wanted to just comment about some of the board governance policies, one of them being the governance investment. And it states in the policy that because poor governance costs more than learning to govern well, the board will invest in its governance capacity. The other is that costs will be prudently established in the year and during the month of November for board member education, third-party monitoring, and linking with the community. The fact that linking with the community and monitoring, third-party monitoring, is a part of the governance investment that I do not feel has always been adequately used. And the third-party monitoring, as in changing the monitoring reports, because they previously were done externally. Some of them were done every quarter. For financial monitoring was done every quarter. Now it's once a year. It was done externally and then switched to internal. There's nothing that ever has any direct inspection anymore. There's 3 choices, not just one. And it is absolutely insane to me to have financial conditions and staff conditions done internally. That makes absolutely no sense. And I would urge you guys to look into changing that, because the options are there for a reason. Linking with the community, as you guys are saying, is more important than anything now, because there is so much concern still about how the board will govern. Will the things that we talked about be followed through with the community, and not just after the fact, and not coming to committees and then just not being listened to, you know, not saying that that's happening. Like, I love policy governance committee, but community engagement committees, or committees for the strategic plan, or for the mergers, or for whatever purpose. If you go there and it's just, you know, no input, and it's just, it doesn't make a difference. So I would urge some meaningful communication with the community to continue, because you guys are on the right path, but I know the community is still concerned about the governance. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? No? All right.
All I really want to say, I'm Kelly from Bristol, is I'm really sad that you're leaving, Steve. And I'd like sent you an email at one point, and I'm just going to say it again because I think it's so important. And I understand that sometimes I can seem maybe like a little bit of a pain. But, but, one of my biggest pet peeves on the board is when board members have opinions and don't share them. And I have to say, Steve, that we agree on some things and we do not agree on others, but I have always respected your stance because you always give a incredibly knowledgeable and extensive answer to how you came to your conclusion. And as a board, there should be a diversity of opinions. So it's okay if our opinions if we don't always come to the same conclusion. And so as I said in the email before, and as I'll say again, I always enjoy hearing you speak. I always enjoy the fact that you do speak. And even though our conclusions aren't always the same, I always respect yours for that reason. And you're a huge asset to this board. And I'm really happy for you, but I'm sad for the board and the committee to lose you. So that's all I have to say is I hope wherever you go, it's better than here. Thank you.
Sarah Mangini.
I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon. I've done 2 or 3 rounds of contract negotiations with you, Steve, and I've always appreciated your level-headedness and willing to work with us and find common ground. So this will be a big loss for the board, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Sarah.
Teresa Guile.
Hi, I think I just wanted to touch on what Katrina was talking about with strategic plan and how, and I could have misunderstood her, but there's a committee of sorts where you have an application process for, I don't know if it's teachers or who to get on this committee, but I would urge the board, as we know it's no secret that there is a big disconnect between administration and the teachers. I would urge the board, somebody outside of that committee should be the ones having the teacher saying, accepting the application for whatever teacher to be on this committee. Because I think that you've heard the community, you've heard our concerns, you've heard the teachers' concerns, and there is a very big disconnect between those two. Why, I don't know, but you've got to bring the teachers into the conversation and you've got to work together, and that doesn't happen. So I urge the board to really look at that, because if you don't, if they're cherry picking or picking who they want to be on this committee, and I'm not saying that's happening, but if they are, then unfortunately you're not going to have a real views from every angle or views from all sides. So again, I just urge the board to look at that, because as we move forward and we're budgeting, etc., one of the things I think you heard loud and clear is that we've got, our teachers need to be supported, and having them be part of the solution and the process of going through the motions of figuring out what is best for our district. They should be a part of that, and that they haven't been. So that's my only thought, and my request is that the board really look at that, because it should be an unbiased board, and a board that the teachers are involved in, because they're the boots on the ground and we need them. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Any other public comment? Kristen?
I just wanted to give a quick little synopsis of the event that we had for Adora at Robinson, as well as Amy Johnston. Very well attended. It was very, very, very bittersweet. And the Friends of Robinson commissioned Miss Joy, the art teacher, to create a mural in the entrance at Robinson in Adora's honor. So I highly recommend people, going in, taking a look when they have the opportunity in the coming months. But it was a lovely, lovely evening, and yeah, just wanted to bring that up. There was nothing on the agenda, so figured this was the place to do it.
And Kristen, that was a great picture of you handing the diploma to your child. That was precious. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Hi, I missed the beginning of Teresa's comment. Was that about the advisory council when Katrina was talking about soliciting new members? Is that about the advisory council?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to assure you, I've been on the advisory. I'm sorry, I should back up. I teach math in the middle school.
Yep,
And
I'm aware.
okay. I've been on the advisory council this year, as have been a nice representation of teachers from around the district. And I just want to assure you that it has been a really positive experience, and I have felt that my voice was heard throughout. And so I just wanted to allay your fears, I guess, that it is, we have a really good group of people working in that capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
I'm sorry, what's your last name, Michelle?
Pierpont.
Pierpont. Don?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Ken?
Hey, I had a question about the $6 million being borrowed. Is that part of the $35 million budget? Or is that in addition to the $35 million?
Floyd, you want to do that or you want to handle it? I'm happy. The $6 million is a cash flow. Just a cash flow management borrowing against the revenue that we have coming in. The budget has not changed. That borrowing is only for the current year to give us cash flow management during the current year. And it gets paid in full every June 30th. And then there's a new one that starts July 1. So it's a 1-year cash flow management number.
Right, so it happens every year. So I guess the real question is, am I paying taxes on 35 million or am I paying taxes on 41 million?
You're paying taxes on the budget, which is 35 million. That $6
Okay.
million is actually invested and generated $275,000 of revenue for the district this year of the amount that we borrowed that we didn't need to use. And we were able to hold in the account, drawing interest off from it. So it actually helps to lower your taxes.
Let's borrow 12 then. I'm kidding.
We're gonna stay at 10.
Hey, the other thing I had, I think Brad mentioned it a couple meetings ago, is maybe not call it a retreat, maybe call it a brainstorming or whiteboarding session, something other than retreat.
Yeah,
Doesn't
it's not
sound
very
good.
relaxing for us either.
It does sound like you're like, gonna go to it's fun.
Yeah.
Not that I want to enjoy all of your fun.
And your retreat has 2 meetings.
We'll find a more, we'll find a more daunting name for it in the future. Thanks, Don.
Karen, could you just like give some understanding as to what happens now that there's an empty board seat? Is it now just anybody, like how do you, what?
So it has to be a Starksboro
Okay,
person, and we have a certain amount of days to appoint one.
okay, so it's just not
Just
like
the-
a vote of the public. It's like a.
No. So we have, is it 30 days? We have 30 days to appoint someone. And if we cannot do it, then we do have to have a special election for a person from Starksboro.
And that comes through appointed for 1 year.
1
until
year,
The
yep.
next election. And then
Or until March, really.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, perfect, thank you very much.
Of course.
I totally.
Yeah.
We will have a meeting in July.
Yeah.
Right, to vote
Well, we'll see if we get anybody to jump up.
Yes,
Yeah.
good point.
Can we have it for the minutes or for everybody who's here about what people should do from Starksboro if they're interested in being considered?
Yep, we're gonna send out, so as part of our sort of process, we send out sort of an ad to join the board. So that'll go out now that his resignation is public. And we've already had some discussions about getting the select board and the town office from Starksboro involved, so we can get some applicants go. Okay, next in the agenda is our first executive session, which is under T1 VSA 53138.
I'm not sure if Michelle has one last thing or not.
Michelle, that's your hand from earlier, correct? Not a separate public comment?
Michelle Pierpont?
I'm just gonna keep
Perfect.
going.
Yep, sorry to interrupt you there.
That's okay. So this is for the appointment or employment of evaluation of a public officer or employee, and this is an employee leave request. And we would need to invite in Katrina. This is our only one that requires an action item at the end. So if I could get a motion to go into executive.
So moved.
Steve? That's
Second.
Barb, second.
We have two members out.
Yeah.
We have a quorum still.
Yeah, we do. Can I get a motion to, or all those in favor of going into executive session? You say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? And three abstentions. We have Justin, Melissa, and Ashley. Okay. So we'll move into executive session. Y'all are staying? Okay, so we will need to go into the campfire room. Okay. So we need an action to approve the leave request for Julie McDonald.
So
Second?
Who said it? Melissa first, Kathy second. All those in favor of approving the leave request for Julie McDonald, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have 4 abstentions, the people who are on our, well, 3, Brad, Kristen, and Liz. Okay. Next, we have our second executive session under T1 VSA 5313A3. Again, the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee. And this has to do with a monitoring report. And please get a motion to approve or to enter executive. We don't need anybody invited. Kylie?
Second.
Barb, second. All those in favor of entering executive session 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Yeah, you can just stand where you, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we need a motion to enter our next executive session, T1 DSA 5313A3. Appointment or employment of evaluation of public officer or employee, and this is for the MAEA listening tour. Motion?
Seconded.
Justin, Daniela, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion. Okay, 9:03, we're in third executive.
Next.
Okay. Can I get a motion to enter T1 VSA 5313A3, appointment or employment evaluation of public officer or employee for board policy compliance? Justin?
Second.
Kathy, all those in favor of entering executive at 9:28, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we'll enter at 9:28.